Hey class, I wanted to go back through and redo my video to be a little bit more concise so that no one has to watch a 20-minute video on this, even though I do think the topic's really interesting. So this week I'm talking about organizational structure and technology, and this is in the broader subtopic of organizational strategy for the MBA 595 class. So with that, I found a really fun paper from the mid 80s that really explores the beginnings of technology being an integral part of the workplace and something that needs to be managed and monitored. So that's going to be kind of fun to dive into. So the paper I selected is Linking Information Technology and Corporate Strategy, an Organizational View. And this is by Michael R. Vitale from Harvard University, Blake Ives from Dartmouth College, and Cynthia M. Beach from the University of Minnesota. And this was written in 1986. There's a case study on airlines, a discussion of overall strategy for managing technology in the workplace. There's two different models that they explore, the top-down model and the adaptive approach. We're going to talk about all of that. We're also going to talk through how that relates to current technology today and extends to the developed offices of the CTO and CIO. I think it's important to remember the context through all of this, that the technology they're talking about as being so disruptive back in 1986 has less horsepower than all of the phones we carry around with us every day. And they still recognize the potential of it, primarily in the form of competitive advantage. This competitive advantage is the core of the paper outlined in the abstract. It identifies the potential positive outcome from applying technology in the workplace and its successful management. So at the time, the paper studied 4 different airlines as they all applied or attempted to apply information technology to improve their ticketing and routing systems. So American Airlines, United, Brandif, and Frontier were all involved, and it actually reached a point where United and American were getting sued because they had applied it so strategically that they were boxing other carriers out of routes. It was obvious from their application that they were standing out because the technology they were using was superior. So this made communication fundamentally easier for them, resulting in a competitive advantage obtained through applied use of technology. This paper presents 2 different leadership styles for managing technology in the workplace, top-down and adaptive. Inside the top-down model, it's very much driven by upper management in terms of this overall technology is going to be used, its implementation, and so much about just the approach of applying technology in the workplace. But given the context of the paper, oftentimes a strategy didn't exist, so managers who are used to top-down management for technology may not have a well put together plan for how to apply technology, and that may also even have divisional differences that would make building a cohesive information infrastructure sort of cogent. All those features would still need to be developed, different than APIs would need to be built to connect divergent systems inside an organization. So there was downsides that strategy was not universally adopted across the board. And of course, that gulf in collective leadership reveals the need for organizational roles such as those that exist inside the offices of the CTO and CIO inside organizations. Further compounding issues in a top-down model would be that folks in the position of making decisions, especially large-scale decisions about technology strategy management inside organizations, may not have the prerequisite experience or understanding of complex problem solving in the domain of technology to create the right strategy. There may not be input from key stakeholders that, of course, at this point now we've recognized are vital in the process, which I'll get to in a little bit. But strategy was not at this point put together at the time of writing of the paper. And I would reason to think even too that not all companies now have strategy figured out for technology management in a way that makes sense. But regardless, at the time of the paper, this is one of the big factors across a wide swath of companies that they had data from, was that their strategies were not fully developed. Further compounding issues in a top-down management style is environmental turbulence. And environmental turbulence is defined as any factor that is outside the direct control of the organization. This would be competitor behaviors, this would be supply chain management, this would be shifting customer trends, aspects of business that would need to be accounted for regardless of how technology would be applied. And this environmental turbulence, especially as other companies started to adopt a lot of information technology, really made an impact. So this was something that was determined to be difficult to lead through in a top-down management style. Fortunately, the adaptive model did provide some fail-safes to help minimize or reduce environmental turbulence. It divided a lot of the stakeholder views into key roles that needed to perform a set function for an organization in order to be successful in managing technology. So it's cool, it's kind of the skeleton of some of the roles that would end up being incorporated under the offices of the CTO or CIO for an organization. And interestingly enough, one of the key players here is the wizard. So I think this is hilarious because, frankly, I think that at one point I had the title of being a genius for Apple, and I just think that like the titles that are sometimes ascribed to people who manage or work with technology are so ridiculous. But regardless, these are technical experts. These are people who know everything about the technology inside and out. And so it's a recognition that their stakeholder viewpoint is incredibly important in how technology is strategized and managed inside of an organization. The next role inside the adaptive model is called the marriage broker. Again, an interesting title to describe a really important role inside technology management. So the person in the role of the marriage broker helps to coordinate projects between end users and the wizards are the people actually developing and building the technological tools for the company. And they are able to move between key stakeholder groups at the exact right timing to really pull off the overall strategy of managing technology and applying it in a way that makes sense. So continuing the trend of hilariously named but integral pieces of technology management inside organizational strategy sort of roles, we have the rich uncle. So the rich uncle represents those inside an organization who are receptive to technology's place as a disruptive force and a way to obtain competitive advantage, that have access to the funds to make it happen inside an organization. Reading a book, Adventures of an IT Leader, a while back for another class, it explores it through the perspective of a fictional character named Barton, who takes on the mantle of CIO unexpectedly and has to manage resource allocations for every single aspect of technology he hopes to implement. I can really see the value of the rich uncle even from the conception of information technology management inside an organization. So we also have the weed puller in the adaptive model. And the weed puller is a stakeholder, multiple stakeholders in an organization that are able to identify when things aren't going the right way and terminate projects or say no to certain requests, and help sort of prune the garden to make sure that everything is going as expected. Lastly, we identified the teacher as being an important part of the adaptive model. I, of course, picked E-Town for my little picture here, but I recognize the value in teachers as well. When I trained as a computer technician for Apple, I got sent out to study off-site with inside Apple who specialized in training technicians how to do repairs, and that was huge for me. I think that with the technology, due to the complexity, you need to have someone that can bring it all together and explain the how and the why, and in this particular paper, that's the role of the teacher. The adaptive model brings us to today and reveals a lot about how we currently manage technology in business. I don't think it's too hard to argue that information technology has fundamentally reshaped the way that we do business. Even outside the technology sector, many industries rely heavily on advanced technologies to maintain a competitive advantage in how they operate. It's almost a prerequisite in a lot of industries to be heavily invested in technology due to the competitive advantage that it provides to the organization. This, of course, brings us to the top in the offices of the Chief Information Officer and Chief Technology Officer. Businesses require big decisions about technology, about how to provision apps, what to build, how to implement it, and there's so many optional choices that managers need to weigh the cost-benefit of. Right now, I'm certain there's a lot of cost-benefit analysis going on in determining who gets to do what from home for various businesses for how long. Thank you so much for your time. I'd appreciate any feedback you have for me about this presentation.